As the Wehrmacht and the Nazis took large swathes of Europe, they committed many war crimes across the territory that they took control of. The Einsatzgruppen were a group who followed the military advances and rounded up civilians and executed them in cold blood. It's estimated that the group killed around 2 million innocent people. Different pockets of resistance emerged within the Nazi-occupied territories, for example the French resistance. However, for every German soldier killed in acts of resistance, the Germans carried out brutal reprisals. Often 100 civilians would be killed for the death of one German officer, but today we look at a member of the SS who was killed in a horrific manner for his acts against the French. So join us today as we look at the brutal execution of Helmuth Kampfe, the Nazi burned alive. And remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Helmuth Kampfe was born in Thuringen in Germany in late 1909, and he followed in his father's footsteps, becoming an apprentice typographer. He trained in this, however, as Hitler seized control of Germany in 1933, he began to seek employment in other means. He joined the German Heer, the land forces of the Wehrmacht. This was formed in May 1935, and it brought back into existence a freestanding German army, air force and navy that had been banned after the First World War with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Previously only the Reichswehr was allowed, a small defensive military force comprising of 100,000 soldiers. However, Hitler's desire to create a huge army not only violated the Treaty of Versailles, but intimidated many countries around Europe. Obviously, the Heer is mostly commonly known as the Wehrmacht, and these were the land forces who carried out the invasions of countries such as Poland, France, and many of the Balkan states, eventually invading the Soviet Union under Operation Barbarossa. Eventually, Kampfe became a lieutenant within the army, before he transferred across to the Waffen-SS in 1939, prior to the outbreak of the Second World War. He rose throughout the ranks of the Waffen-SS and saw much action on the Eastern Front. Here he commanded the 3rd Battalion, the Das Reich's Division Reconnaissance Group, the 4th Panzer Grenadiers, der Führer Regiment, and was noted for his excellent leadership and bravery. For this he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross during the winter of 1933 in the Soviet Union. Kampfe was one of only 630 men awarded the Close Combat clasp in gold. Operation Barbarossa was a very mixed campaign for the Germans, with initial successes being met with horrendous withdrawals and failures, for example the loss of the 6th Army at Stalingrad. However, in spring 1944, the Das Reich Division had been sent from Russia and the Eastern Front for the Western Front, and Kampfe was sent to lead there. At this time in the war, it was likely that the Allies were preparing to invade occupied Europe, so the Germans made mass preparations for this eventuality. Because of this, whole units were taken from the Eastern Front and sent west to provide more forces in the areas such as northern France, where it was assumed that the Allies would invade. Helmuth Kampfe was ordered by the military high command to complete a number of operations within the southern uplands in central France. Whilst here, he was tasked with carrying out attacks against the Maquis, a group of rural guerrilla fighters of the French resistance. The Maquis was made up of mostly young working class men who had managed to avoid conscription into the French compulsory work service to provide forced labour for Nazi Germany. They had ran into the mountains and woods and subsequently established resistance factions and eventually formed into more organised sections and detachments. Most Maquisards, as they were known, operated within the mountain regions of Brittany and southern France, and they used guerrilla tactics to harass the German soldiers. They helped Allied airmen escape, along with Jews and others pursued by the Germans. They held good positions in the hills and mountains and could easily spot the Germans who were searching for them, and their tactics allowed the Germans to develop fear, and they intimidated a number of German soldiers. The Maquis took part in no large battles, and they did not concentrate their men in one area, only relying on guerrilla attacks. They initially used revolvers and hunting rifles, however were eventually equipped with better weapons, such as the Sten machine gun. The Maquis had an involvement during the Allied invasion of Normandy, as they helped to delay the German mobilisation of forces to the north of France, like where Kampfe would try to end up. They were informed of D-Day through coded messages over the BBC radio, and as the Allied advanced through France, the French resistance in the Maquis rose against the Nazis en masse. They were a constant thorn in the side of the Germans. However, Helmuth Kampfe was sent to deal with them with his soldiers. Things initially did not go well for Kampfe. 3 days after D-Day took place and the Allied invasion of Normandy had taken place, Kampfe was captured 4 kilometres east of Saint-Léonard-de-Noblat by a group led by Jean Canu. Canu then handed Kampfe over to Colonel Georges Guingouin, a French communist militant who was high up within the Maquis. He was then held within the communist group of the Maquis, and it was this group who carried out his brutal murder and execution. Kampfe was the highest ranking officer ever to be captured by members of the French resistance. He had been captured by members of the French communist resistance, and as soon as it was realised that Kampfe had been kidnapped, German troops were sent to go and locate him. However, the resistance had other ideas. It had been decided that Helmuth Kampfe was to be ceremoniously burned alive on the 10th of June 1944. A brutal search was launched by the Germans that began with 2 men being shot near to the place where he disappeared, and later that day reprisals would get much more brutal. Helmuth Kampfe was taken to a village north of horrendous called Brelufa on the 10th of June 1944. In front of a huge crowd, he along with other members of the SS were burned alive in a huge spectacle. The execution of such high-ranking members of the SS was met by cheers by those French people who witnessed Kampfe's execution. The exact accounts of Kampfe's execution remain sketchy. However, it's presumed that he and other soldiers were thrown into the back of a German field ambulance which had been abandoned. They were then all locked inside the vehicle, and this was set on fire, with all of the Germans inside scrambling to get out. However, they could not. Some sources then state that Kampfe's body was taken to horrendous. However, what the Nazis did there was incredibly savage in reprisals for the burning and execution of Helmuth Kampfe. It was said that SS Sturmbannführer Adolf Diekmann, a personal friend of Kampfe, found his handcuffed charred body inside the German field ambulance with the remains of other German soldiers outside of the village. This vehicle had been set on fire, burning everyone else inside alive. After seeing his friend's body, the SS man then ordered the village to be destroyed and razed to the ground, killing any civilian that they came across. The SS men then began shooting any resident they found. The men were led to 6 barns and sheds, and the women and children locked inside a church. The village was looted. However, in the barns the men were shot in the legs and unable to move, and then the barn was set on fire. 190 Frenchmen died in this method, and the attack on the church was then carried out. The SS men then went to the church and placed an incendiary bomb beside it. It was then lit, and the women and children tried to escape the burning building by the windows, but were then mown down by machine gun fire. 247 women and 205 children died in the church attack, and there was only 1 survivor. 643 inhabitants of the village were killed in reprisals for the attack against Helmuth Kampfe. So the execution of Helmuth Kampfe itself was incredibly brutal, with the SS officer being burned alive. However, what occurred after was incredibly horrifying and barbaric, with the German army carrying out the brutal and savage reprisals that they became known for. Today the massacre of the village is commemorated, as it was said that it would remain a memorial to the cruelty of the Nazi occupation, and the ruins stand still as a memorial to the dead. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.